Hi everyone, welcome to or back to my channel. My name is James Feeney. I'm here today to respond to or create a VR to the lovely Kasha at TaraMap who started a tag My Fairy Tale. This tag to me is like so exciting. Um, I loved hers. I thought it was the most what an idea. So I really wanted to hop on this one as quick as possible. I may look a little tired. It's quite early in the morning, but I wanted before my day gets going to film this because I had all the ideas rattling in my head. So the general gist of this VR is to take a fairy tale that you have a really strong inclination towards, or maybe as a child were really enamored with, and to apply the lessons and the key attributes of it to your life as it has progressed. So Kasha used The Little Mermaid, and that was one of her favorites, the Brothers Grimm version, and spoke on that a bit. I'll link obviously hers down below, her channel and the video itself, so you guys can all see that. I really recommend it. And I remember I like commented pretty quickly, thinking like just mentioning that I needed to think about it for a minute, and so she had a story on her Instagram which I responded to, and right away, based on like what she'd said, I knew for me that it was Hansel and Gretel, which I'll get into in a second. But she was so nice. I wrote to her about that, and she had it reminded her of something. She had an entry or knew something about it in terms of I believe it's Orosoma, or like Orosoma Tarot and Orosoma. And so she sent me these wonderful excerpts from, I believe it's an Orosoma book, and it's like in reference to the bottles or the tarot and the Orosoma. I'm not 100% sure. And I'm filming on my phone, otherwise I would reference it, but I did just go back and look at them right before this. And that was so illuminating and helpful for me. So Kasha, if you're watching this, thank you so much. That in part really also got me going and wanting to make this video, because it was very uncanny, almost eerily so, in the sort of traits and attributes and associations. I believe that the two bottles or the two cards that were linked to Hansel and Gretel were 92 and 93, Temperance the Return and Devil the Return. So the second major arcana in the Orosoma Tarot, there's a second major arcana that comes after all of the cards, and it's almost like this return, like the Fool is the enlightened fool, things like that. So it's the Temperance Return and the Devil Return. And she also mentioned a bit about how it relates to the sacred feminine or the divine feminine, and the relationship there, which I also thought was so funny. Upon reading these, there is a lot to do with getting in touch with the sacred feminine or the feminine within, and the balance there. And meanwhile, the past few videos that I've been making have been very much geared towards that balance, and I thought that that was just so fitting and so funny, because that is something that I think about very often, and I'm constantly implementing it to my life. I am working through a lens or a viewpoint that is taking those things into consideration. So where Hansel and Gretel comes in for me, I guess I'll try to make it a short story time. Basically, I had like where I grew up, I had a library right down the street, and at least once a week, my mom would walk with my sister and I to the library. She would take us to the library, and we would pick out all these books that we wanted. And it was like this weekly ritual that we had going to the library. And I remember that you could only take out a certain amount of books on one library card. And so my sister and I, obviously because we were both functioning under my mom's library card, were limited to the amount of books we could take out. And I wanted to take out more books. And meanwhile, we were checking out Hansel and Gretel pretty much every single week. I'm not sure if that was allowed, but the librarians or the people there allowed us to do it, because I don't think it was very much in demand. But I would get my sister and I would get my mom to take out Hansel and Gretel every single week. But I also wanted more books, and I wanted to be able to check it out for myself. So actually, how the first time that I learned to write my name was so that I could sign the library card, because they told me that I could have a library card if I could write my name or I could sign my name. So I spent a whole afternoon practicing writing my name, and eventually I got it down, and I had my mom take me over to the library, and I wrote my name out so I could get my library card so I could check out Hansel and Gretel among other books. And I think it was honestly for years, for like from the span of being like maybe like 3 or 4 to like 7 or so, we would be checking out Hansel and Gretel almost every single time we were there, if not every like consecutive time. And I would have my parents read it to us going to bed. It was one of the first books that I learned to read on my own. And this was, of course, like not in a big Brothers Grimm. In the start, we got it was like a paperback or a hardcover like picture book. And now that I think about it, it did ring pretty true to the Brothers Grimm version, which was read at a little bit later. But of course, when I was super young, my parents didn't want to read me something that had like those sort of dark elements, I guess. But as I got a little bit older, they were willing to. So that was a big thing. And I guess part of also what drew me to it was my sister and I are extremely close. We are a year and 5 days apart, actually. And she's like my best friend. We've done everything together. We've never been siblings that really fight. We are like constantly talking throughout any given day. We are very different, but we are basically best friends. So, and we are both two little Sagittarius, so yeah. I don't know if that makes a difference, but I think it's interesting. So, yeah, I guess maybe that was part of what factored into it. And then I remember there was different versions of different movies about Hansel and Gretel, and we that were also in the library in like the VHS section, and we would have our mom check those out as well, and we would love to watch these different versions made of Hansel and Gretel turned into like a live action or like a movie. So we loved that. And I guess we loved the brother-sister aspect and how they work together, and we're in this sort of story together. We could put ourselves in it because it was two siblings that were about the same age, that were doing things together, that were on an adventure together, and that really appealed to us. And it kind of made us feel united against the parents, because the parents in Hansel and Gretel are not so nice, although our parents are great. So yeah, I went back, and it's been a while since I'd read Hansel and Gretel, so I went back and read it yesterday after watching Kasha's video, and I found it so interesting. There was a lot that I forgot. Yeah, you have like the really horrid mother who's trying to get rid of the parents. You have the weak-minded father who twice does not want to get rid of the children, but relents to the nagging, I believe it's stepmother. And the first time they are smart enough to get their way back, but the second time they aren't able to. Hansel's not able to gather stones the night before because the mother locks the door, so they're trying to leave breadcrumbs instead because that's all they have, which of course gets eaten up. And I do think it's also funny that in the beginning, Hansel is very much the one to take charge, the one with the plan. He's the one who has the plan to leave the rocks, tells Gretel that everything will be okay, so on and so forth. And even when they first arrive at the house, and then he gets put in the cage, and this is when the roles shift, and it's Gretel that ends up being the one to outsmart the witch and burn her up. And then on top of that, even just heading home, apparently Gretel has these magical powers that she can sing and summon a duck to carry them across a body of water, and she's wise enough to know that it can only carry one of them at a time. So it very much is a shift from the brother kind of having the leadership role, who knows what to do and is going to save them, to the sister intuiting what is to come and how to save them. So I also attribute this to throughout life, my sister and I having very different personalities, different strengths and characteristics. We are very, I wouldn't say polar opposite, but we are very, very different people in our approach to life, our philosophies. There's a lot of differences. So there are many areas where her strengths and attributes shine, and that she needs to kind of be the leader and take charge. And then there are other times when I do, and there is a real balance within this tale. starting out and how the role flips and what they're both able to do and where their strong suits sort of shine, and how that's able to save them. And then, of course, there's the ending, which never satisfied me completely, and maybe that's why I kept reading it, hoping for maybe somewhat of a different ending. They show back, they've taken treasure from the witch, and they show up at home again, and their stepmother or the mother, I can't remember if it's a stepmother or mother, but I think it's a stepmother, has passed away from hunger, which is why they'd gotten rid of the children originally, so that they wouldn't starve. They'd rather the children die and starve so that they have food. But it turns out she died anyway. And so they show up at home with the treasures that they'd stolen from the witch after they kill her. And their father's there, and they give him all the riches, and they live happily ever after. But I never felt right about them going back to live with a father who was so easy to manipulate into essentially killing them or trying to kill them. So that never sat well with me, and I really had hoped that they would run off, and I mean, they were children. I don't know what they would have necessarily done, but it's also a fairy tale. Yeah, so that never really sat quite right with me. But of all fairy tales, it does have a more happy ending. They do come home to their father. The evil woman who really was the one that wanted them dead is gone, along with the witch. And they have riches and are going to be okay. So that aspect of it is very appealing compared to some of the other Grimm Brothers fairy tales, which don't have such happy endings or have endings that are kind of a dual blade. Kind of like Little Mermaid, which Kasha goes into in her video. That ending is not necessarily happy. You could argue that it worked out alright, but I wouldn't call that a happy ending at all. And I think that that's extremely interesting. So yeah, and then I guess now it's about applying it to my life as it's been. So you know how it factors into, I guess, the dynamic of my sister and I. I'd mentioned that there's just a lot of situations, especially growing up around each other, being like essentially the same age, that we were always in situations together. The part of the reason we liked the book was because we could see ourselves in it, and it was one that we could both be in. It wasn't a princess book where we would see my sister as the heroine and I would be not in this novel, and it wasn't, say, like a hero in a knight in shining armor where it was just me as like the protagonist in the book, speaking like as projecting into the book. This was one where we could both equally project, and they were about our age or similar to, so it was a lot more real for us. And going through life, I think I think part of actually, and when Kasha sent the Orifsoma descriptions and going into that and the masculine and feminine, that struck me a lot, and that's where I really started to dig in and see. And I had never looked at Hansel and Gretel as a tale about the masculine and feminine and balance and the interplay there. And then after that, it made so much sense. I mean, I guess on some level I may have thought that, but it wasn't ever conscious to me, and it was like an aha moment once I read that. So yeah, so not even just between my sister and I, but within myself. And I remember there being a passage in the thing that Kasha sent me about trusting the inner child, the feminine inner child. So not just the feminine, but the child, like the youthful, almost like naive but free-spirited, pure of heart side or aspect to yourself. Like Gretel just wants to save her brother, just wants to live, and her intuition guides her very purely from that place, like in pushing the witch into the oven and shutting the door, or approaching the river that they must get across, and just singing and knowing that an animal will arrive to carry them across. It's very yeah, I don't know a better way to put it, or I can't think of something better than just pure of heart. Super pure intention, just a kindness. There's nothing about it. There's no ulterior motive or thought process, and she's not even at an age where there's those super complex thoughts pouring into Oh, sorry, phone is ringing. Okay. Sorry about that. I might have edited that part out. I don't know if I actually will have, but the phone was ringing. Yeah, I'm back. But she's kind of at that age where they're both at that age where they don't, and I think Hansel's a tiny bit older, which is where his more strategic planning comes in, and she's the younger sister, and they're both very young. So she's not really at that age where she's planning and having these different avenues of thought entering her head. She's very much acting from a place of intuition and feeling, and that kind of thing. So that's super interesting, and how that is just as necessary and a savior to them as, if not more so, than Hansel's strategic plotting that happens in the beginning. So yeah, and then seeing that within myself, I'm trying to recollect what was within the passages that Kasha sent, because they were just so loaded with awesome information. There was a bit about trusting of oneself, trusting of others, emotional balance, being willing to sort of having issues with like emotional relationships and things like that, which I thought was interesting. I can definitely see that more so within myself, but also in the sorts of relationships that I've had throughout my life. I'm definitely somebody who's more closed off, who may, in a first meeting, appear semi like vibrant and bubbly and agreeable. I get along pretty well with most people, I would say. But I don't really open up to or share deep thoughts and feelings with even people that are very close to me. I'm very reserved in that way. It takes a lot over years to maybe get certain things out. So I could see those aspects of Hansel and Gretel and their attributions in myself, I guess, in my path with kind of coming to terms with the feminine, the divine feminine, or the sacred feminine, and how it has a role within myself. I mean, there's countless, if not endless, examples of that. I mean, just like being comfortable with who I am, with my sexuality, and having sort of like, I mean, as many do, like an inner shame regarding that, and then that sort of like point where you can continue to like bottle it up, or it just flows out, and you don't, it's not that you handle it, but you start to come to terms with it, and take the leap of faith that things will be all right if you like come out and are open. So yeah, I think that was, I can really attribute it to like the relationship of my sister and I throughout our life, my relationship with myself, with the masculine and feminine within me, within my emotional relationships with others, with my sexuality, with my intuition, and learning to trust that, as opposed to I do tend towards a more analytical, empirical, rational approach. I would say that that's my natural default, and that for most of my life I've yearned for the other, and a lot of my journey has been almost like fighting the tide of rationality and the mind, and trying to let the intuition and the well, I guess the other aspect of the mind, the unconscious, or my heart, emotions, to let those kind of lead me and take the reins, and to quiet the mind a little bit. So there's just a lot to unpack here, and I hope it wasn't too scatterbrained, although I will continue to think about this for days to come, and I'm sure that there will be new insights and aha moments and epiphanies that will occur for me in terms of this. And yeah, this has just been a really awesome experience. I am so grateful to Kasha for having shared this, and yeah, you guys really need to go check hers out. I'm also going to be scouring the YouTube to see if and what others have said and what their fairy tales are and maybe how that can be connected to their life. I just find that to be incredibly interesting. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope to see you all soon. I'm sure I will. Feel free to comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I never talk about that because I don't know, part of me doesn't want to ask or doesn't feel like I should ask, but if you feel so inclined, do so. But until next time, bye guys.